see so many of you here this morning. Thank you for making this one of your first talks of the day. It's really, really wonderful to just have everyone here. As you heard, I'm Director of Operations at Hijinks, which is a women and queer-owned creative agency. I'm also a partner in the creative industry, helping to champion impact. So, for example, with University of the Arts London, helping to set strategic direction to future-proof creative industries. Now, the D&AD Impact category seeks to really champion projects, products, initiatives that are driving progress towards the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And it's worth acknowledging a lot of the disruption that's been caused by world events like the wars, COVID, and also just politics in general, which has really hampered that progress. So it's important now more than ever to really celebrate and inspire the next cohort of entrepreneurs and creative minds and change makers. Now, with no further ado, I would love for you to meet this incredible panel, my fellow jury on impact. I think it would actually be really nice and personal and more memorable if they introduce themselves. And as you do, just give us a little bit of a taste for the lens that you've brought to this category as you've been debating and deliberating everything. We'll start with Joanna Catalano.
Thanks, Amy. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for joining us. I'm Joanna. I'm currently in an HR role, so I run HR for Uber, the delivery side of the business, the food side across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I've been involved with Impact since its inception, so I think I bring that lens, just how the category has evolved over time, and it's been in place for quite a number of years now, since the launch of the SDGs. And I think the other lens that I bring is as a business leader. So having been in general management roles where I've owned a P&L, also in commercial leadership roles where I've worked with big brands, global brands, and with the CMOs of those companies. So I'm always trying to think about it, I think, through that lens. And I think the last one is as a parent. So I have 2 teenagers, and I think that also changes how I view the work.
Sydney Scott Sam.
Hey everyone, I'm Sydney. I'm the CEO of WorkspaceGlobal.com, which is a SaaS platform that is leading a mission to ensure that anyone, any entrepreneur, any marketer anywhere in the world has access to teams, no matter what stage they are in at their business, to be able to build a great brand. So I'm bringing the lens of connecting different ecosystems, mainly because my platform connects the early stage business ecosystem in the West, so in Europe and in the US, to design teams in Africa and managing the relationships between that to ensure that there's no risk. So I really challenge a lot of the projects that I've seen to ensure that they can have that cross-geographic collaboration, where there's a world where corporates are able to also create real, long-term sustainable change in underrepresented parts of the world and underrepresented groups. And just generally to ensure that the things that we're putting out into the world are sending the right signals for others to be able to create problems that really push impact.
Thank you. And we'd love to hear from you, Roshi Gavechi.
Hi, I'm Roshi. Really nice to be here with you all. I'm a designer, facilitator, and documentary filmmaker, and I think a lot of what I feel really lucky about is since I've been an independent consultant, I've been able to work with a lot of social impact organizations, and as a facilitator, help co-architect global summits, where different types of leaders focused on different initiatives, different UN sustainable goals, come through to try to reignite what they're doing and get perspectives from each other to see how they can work together sometimes to solve problems. And before that, I was with an organization called IDEO for about 19 years. So I'm really happy to be here and a part of this jury on impact. Thank you.
Thank you. And we received a tremendous number of incredible applicants to this category, projects that are trying to, whether it's ending poverty, driving education, clean water, health and well-being, etc. And so I think let's kick off by diving into those projects that you guys were really struck by. And we'll start with Joanna's piece, which is called Space Trash Signs for Privateer by Service Plan Germany. We'll watch the video.
more objects are being launched into space than ever, resulting in more trash in space than ever, which threatens the critical infrastructure we all depend on, from communication to food production and more.
People don't understand how space debris can threaten their daily life. It's not visible.
Introducing Space Trash Science, visualizing the consequences of space pollution by turning space debris into constellations. From the broken compass to the lost harvest. 10 constellations, discovered within millions of constantly moving points.
We aggregate all these data and information from multiple sources, curating these for each consequence. The data is filtered by location, source object, and shape, time-stamped, monitored, and regularly updated.
The space trash signs were brought to life through a web-based virtual observatory, allowing users to explore all the signs, their data, and impact, along with background information. Integration into AR stargazing apps and an immersive planetarium experience brought the space trash signs into the real world.
It is very, very well suited to the planetarium, though. People can really experience the danger.
All touchpoints led to the ESA Zero Debris Charter.
The influence from the general public is absolutely critical.
Space Trash Signs started a global conversation about sustainability in space.
This is exactly why we need to talk about it.
Well, you should care because we rely on satellites.
We have to have a lot of open communication.
It's important to make it visible.
Leading to more sign-ups for the charter, more funding for privateer, and finally, consequences for polluters.
The Federal Communications Commission announced the first ever penalty regarding space debris.
Amazing.
Yeah, we can clap. I feel like
Yeah,
we
I think so. It deserves one.
We've been looking at a lot of work over the last few days, and so at some point you get a little bit fuzzy, and it's nice to have had a break and to come and rewatch this entry. So yeah, impressive. I think for a number of reasons, and I guess one of the other things, just to give you a bit of behind the scenes, one of the beauties of being in this jury, and you kind of heard it in our intros, is the diversity of perspective. And so one of the reasons why I chose this piece of work was the discussion in the room was lively and I think reflective of varying degrees of understanding of this problem. So whenever we get a piece of work where there are individuals who start off in feeling like, I'm not sure, and then get behind it, it's always, and it's always a very meaningful experience. A little bit more about this piece of work. So I think it's space, and there's been just such an increase, going back to the fact I've been involved with this category for a while. 5 years ago, you definitely wouldn't have seen an entry like this. So, it just shows what's happening, like how our world is evolving. And so you have in this piece of work, using space, that satellites are going up, satellites that are both meaningful and needed, from an agriculture, from a poverty, from a equality, giving people access to the internet. We spoke about this. Access, it also helps from a financial equality perspective. So I think that was really important, just the number of SDGs that the work spoke to. I think the second one for me was around benevolent use of AI. So we're all hearing about AI these days. And when we were looking at the entries, actually this year it was new, there was a tick box around, was AI used? And so obviously they are using AI in this situation. The third is I've been involved with data professionally for quite a number of years. So I'm always looking at where is there use of data for good. And I think that this is an example. You saw how they were like creating these constellations, raising awareness. By the way, they're using constellations. It's just a place of beauty. So they're taking a model that we're all familiar with. It spans generations from the time you're like a child, till you get old, just this wonder of like the sky and the stars. And they connect it to this problem, right? Space trash. So that was another thing that drew me to it. And then I guess where do we go from here? So we're in the impact category. And so one thing I think we're a bit sensitive to is like how does this continue to evolve? And I think there are a number of ways. One of the stats that they didn't include in the case study, but that we had access to is in the US, there's now an FCC tax or charge that's being given to businesses in this area. And so I think where you start to get into the domain of legislation or standards, I mean, I'm not sure if any of you are aware of like how many satellites were launched last year, but it's not a space that's super regulated right now. So I think, yeah, that this has the potential to provide standard or guidelines around how we caretake space. The other sort of extension or where this can go is from an education. So you saw that they've sort of reignited planetariums, you know, and I think it's, I don't know, I don't have foot traffic numbers on planetariums, but I love that they were using this physical space and sort of giving it a new use case. And they're also looking at how they can weave this into education, be it, you know, sort of at the elementary level, but all the way through. And so I think the opportunity for partnership, both with educational institutions as well as scientific institutions, is quite powerful.
Amazing.
So that's a long list, but yeah, there's my take on it.
I love that. Thank you. And I think it's, you know, it's really interesting to see how relatable and urgent they've managed to position this whole project as, because like you say, it's very easy to think of it as literally out of this world, not relevant for our day to day. And also they, you know, you were talking on the space economy, and they do say the next cohort of trillionaires will be born from there. So I'd love to dig in more into some of the risks that you do see around that. You talked on legislation. Is there anything more you could share around that?
The risks in terms of like not, you know, well, I think to a certain extent, you know, I don't know about the space trillionaires. I agree with you. Like space as an economy is a little bit concerning. I see Ben there. We were talking about his friend who's like super into space and now is, propagating this as the next frontier. So I think for me, maybe it's you know, there's this tension. There's always tension where a new domain is brought forth. But I think what's critical is that we keep in mind, like, what is the benefit that we're getting from this economy? And if there's, so with trash, space trash in particular, if there's too much trash, guess what? It comes crashing down. Then we don't have this access. And then it becomes a bit of a case of haves and have-nots and who has money to get versus who hasn't. So I think for me, that was the biggest risk that I saw in this, and why it was important was like, what are the unintended consequences that we might not be aware of, and how can we use that as a force for good in how we educate people.
Awesome. And I think there's some interesting learnings around how they approached media for this particular project as well. Is it worth covering some of that a little bit as well in terms of how they made their media planning like really meaningful?
The media planning from what perspective?
I think they looked at things like really tailored to different parts of the world.
Oh, yeah, the constellations themselves.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. So, so the way they chose were the constellations. They picked like, so the Lost Harvest or the Great 404, or there was one, I thought we were going to show it. There were two stills I want to show. So they picked the constellation, they located the constellation, they were looking for where debris was, and then they designed and shaped the constellation. There it is, there's the Great 404, over a part of the world, like in Peru in the Amazon, is where they located the Lost Harvest. And it's really intended to show what are the implications from an agriculture perspective on that debris.
Thank you. Right. I think let's dive into Roshi's choice, which is Magnetic Stories by Siemens Healthineers, created submission-wise Area 23.
The magical trail was called imagination, leaving a trail known as inspiration.
Every MRI scanner makes a unique sequence of sounds, so you can predict when each sound will occur in the scan. We created children's audiobooks to match the sounds of the most common pediatric scans, syncing story moments precisely with each sound in the scan. Now, the stories give new and delightful meaning to all MRI noises. This noise becomes a clumsy robot.
Hey boy, turned on a tiny robot by mistake. What a mess it made.
And the loud sound becomes a brave spaceship.
Project Laser dance, our heroes stepped on with great advance.
Os casos em que as crianças de oncologia vêm a fazer várias vezes este exame, é muito importante termos um projeto como este, com história e com sons, para poder ajudar essas crianças a fazerem os exames sempre que seja necessário.
Our pilot in Portugal was a success. We are eager to expand to multilingual stories. Throughout millions of MRIs worldwide, this is just the beginning.
Vê-la feliz é uma pequena vitória nesta grande batalha.
Eu pensava que ia ser horrível, mas até foi divertido. Posso falar no novo agora?
So with what the piece that Joanne was highlighting was about new problems we're causing in a world beyond that most of us haven't actually experienced. And we might wonder, well, why are we focused, on the sustainable goals around something that's been around for a long time like cancer? But the truth is we still need to address the livelihood and well-being of individuals of all ages. So that's one of the reasons this really spoke to us. And in addition, it's based in Portugal. And one of the things, I don't know if you've experienced this, but it's sometimes really difficult to think, where do we begin to address some of these global challenges? They're systemic issues. We can't do it alone. And what's really beautiful about this approach is they're actually designing with the challenge. They're not trying to, if we could solve for the noise of the machines instantly, sure, that would be one way to address it. But in the meantime, we learned that the children with cancer might sometimes have to go and use these machines, the MRI machines, every 2 months. And they're, if anyone's had the unfortunate reason to use these, you might feel claustrophobia. They may provide music for you, but again, a child may not have that ability to disassociate as we might as adults. So what's really unique about this is saying, well, how can we actually use the worst part of this tool that's helpful and make that a design intervention and a design spark? And so if you can see here, based on different known scans, like the spine scan, for example, in the quotes you'll see it says, a shower of potato chips. In the storyline that was all sequenced and timed, they actually integrated a story about a salesman that gets the pelican, a pesky pelican attacks the salesman, and the potato chips start falling from the sky. So that's quite absurd, but again, it's a way to help use narrative as an experience to help children escape. And it fundamentally enables a reduction in the use of anesthesia to help calm children down. So I think for the reasons I highlighted, sometimes it's even more effective to say, let's not try to boil the ocean and solve all the challenges at once. Let's think about what we can do to help an individual feel better, to help the physicians be able to focus on the task at hand. So it's a small system, if you will, but it can begin to inspire the rest of us to think, okay, now that this is working locally, how can we extrapolate this? What can we take in our own context, considering different cultural, medical, health interests in place?
Yeah, it's just such a great example of the power of creativity. And I think, in industries that are, less sexy, where you don't expect creativity to be thriving as much. It just shows the importance of showing up in those spaces. And do you, in the conversations, did you guys have any thoughts on how this could then really inspire other industries like healthcare, or, in terms of problem solving?
Great point. One of the things I wanted to mention too is they hired actual authors and story writers to write these narratives, and they became popular enough to be sold in regular audiobook context.
Amazing.
One of the things that did come up for us was, a lot of the global challenges are important and therefore they're heavy. They're really just weighted issues. And what we have noticed in some of the entries is there isn't as much presence for levity. Like, we don't see humor. I mean, we shouldn't make fun of things, but we can still solve really critical challenges, but the tone doesn't have to be equally heavy and dire. So as creatives, as people who run businesses, how do we make space for ways to allow different tonalities, different expressions to actually help reach the heart, not just the intellect?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or the physical needs in this case.
And I'd love to hear if there were any other kind of dissenting kind of opinions that did come up in the discussions at all, or people who'd kind of been very close to this sort of experience and how it might have landed. Anything that came out of the discussions that were interesting?
I think, as jurors, we're always trying to check our own assumptions. Like, is this really good enough now? Have we seen this before? And of course, as creative people, nothing is totally original, and so we need to make sure we provide that kind of grace. Like, something applied to a new context still has value and still has merit. As far as dissent, I don't think there's any major controversy around this. I think one might question, like, is this really scalable? Is this specific to one client and their products? That's a reality. Clients are businesses, or, organizations are businesses. Everyone's trying to figure out a way to differentiate. And I think the one thing that I would wish for is, even if public pressure is challenging organizations to change something about what they offer, as creatives, we can help make sure the interest in what we solve for is authentic. So it's not just like, we're doing this because it's going to sell more. We should do it so it sells more, and it fundamentally is solving a really important dilemma in our society today.
Brilliant. Thank you, Roshi.
Thank you.
We will move on to Sydney's choice, which is Fit My Feet by Buckaroo. McCann India are behind this piece.
मेरा नाम सारिका है और मेरे पैर बचपन से ही ऐसे हैं। सर्जरी करना मुश्किल है ये, और चप्पल मिलना और भी मुश्किल।
We needed a bespoke solution that's cost-effective to produce, yet affordable and could reach millions.
जैसे मेरा पैर है वैसे आकार का चप्पल पहनी अपना परफेक्ट बैठता है पैर में इसके लिए बहुत अच्छा लगा है
Yeah, so I really love this project. I mean, it really hits close to home for me because I'm in a space where I'm trying to solve a really huge problem, which is the millions of people who might be unemployed in Africa in some years, and the size of this problem might trigger in our minds a very complex solution, right? But I loved the fact that it's a huge problem with a simple solution that can be delivered at scale. So that connection was what really drew me to this project. And it's a leatherworks company, so obviously they're into shoes and footwear. But to think about this in the level that they did the research, put the work in, and thinking about that last mile approach of most people would think, okay, to deliver a customized product, we needed to have some kind of center or, very high priced way to order. But they said, okay, we don't need to deliver the end product. We will design the product, deliver the materials in a kit using excellent, simple visual language that any cobbler in the area could use, whether they were educated or not, to be able to help solve the problem, and then deliver that customized solution to hopefully 1.3 million people who have this problem. And I just loved it. And the signal that we're thinking about is for people who are creating things, building things, delivering campaigns, helping engineer solutions. I really want to challenge you not always to think about the most complex and sophisticated way to do things, because sometimes the simplest things are right in front of you, but just because of the way you process information, you're biased to adding multiple layers of complication, to be able to do that. So that's one. The other thing I was thinking about also was from the business perspective, the ecosystem engagement along the value chain, right? So they could have thought about delivering this themselves, but the idea of creating an additional revenue stream for cobblers in these areas is multiple levels of impact. So helping people from a medical perspective and then helping livelihoods as well, right? So, and also making it sustainable, because this is not something they're delivering for free, but it is at a price that the target group can afford. So I just loved everything, regarding the execution of this project. Yeah.
I love this project. Yeah, really just so very, very thoughtful. And would you have any kind of, I guess, learnings or notes to share around this idea of it's obviously contextually perfect, and how might others from elsewhere be able to think globally but very locally at the same time, as they're considering how to solve problems, that are out there?
So the one thing I wanted to encourage is how to think about the support for the target audience and collaboration, right? So most of us think of collaboration in terms of two big international organizations or clients and agency. But if you think about collaboration from the business, the target audience, and an ecosystem around it, that opens a new lens of thinking, regarding that. And you're collaborating with people who may not know who you are, but it's still a real human collaboration that is driving change. So that's just the one thing I would like to challenge. Yeah.
Amazing. And out of interest, for you, and actually on this project and actually even beyond, is there anything that you would like to see more of next year in the submissions that are coming in? What might have been missing or we just need more of?
So, well, there was one thing that it's not a very sexy point, but I noticed that with some of the projects, because the problems were very exciting and bold, the creative execution was lacking. And I just want to encourage people not to compromise on craft, because as much as we were judging impact, craft was actually a really huge thing that we challenged. And so I loved the fact that the branding was good, the visual communication was good. This could be delivered across multiple products around the world at this level of execution. And so if you're picking a problem in a very random place in the world, don't compromise on the fact that you have to deliver global standard work that can be replicated and celebrated on a global scale. So that's what I would
love
say.
that.
Yeah.
Any builds from the two of you?
I want to echo what you said about the collaborative notion. What we were checking ourselves on too is for any collaborative pieces, a project or an outcome could not exist without the interest in working across different parts of the ecosystem. And that to us was really inspiring to consider.
Amazing. Thank you all so much. We're out of time. We could have been here talking for much longer. I hope you got lots out of this. I certainly loved hearing from all of you guys. Thank you.